Hello and welcome to the Sexient Being Sessions. Today we're here to talk about when size matters. So if you've ever wondered how much does size really matter? Am I good enough? Do I measure up? All these things. You are in the right place. And this goes for whether you're male or female, because there can be stigmas and societal norms that have surrounded both. I'm Alix Pruett, a certified sex, love, and relationship coach with a BDSM and kink focus. I work with men, women, and couples plus who want to transform their old patterns, pain, and beliefs so they can create thriving relationships that are deeply connected, playful, and fulfilling within themselves and with others. So let's just dive into this. When does size matter? Right? This is the topic at hand, and there is, again, so many narratives, so much information that we get about this, and if our bodies are measuring up, like literally and figuratively, on so many levels. And the truth about the matter really is that size only really matters when you're making it matter, and to the degree you're making it matter. And this can be hard because we want to compare ourselves. We actually get very conditioned to socially compare ourselves, which a lot of those standards, a lot of what's created for the comparison is based on what we're seeing in porn, what we assume others are experiencing, um, overhearing conversations. But there is a lot of myth that falls into all of that. And that's kind of what we're here to debunk. And one of the most valuable things that anybody can default to, especially if you have had issues in this area with acceptance of your genitalia, of your body, is really coming to these profound places of acceptance in what your body is, how it's serving you, an understanding of what you have to work with, what you have going on. And then ultimately, if you can get there, coming to self love around what you have and finding this deep gratitude and appreciation. And when you can come to that, it creates these immense spaces where you can actually be more present in the moment with your partners, with yourself, and just really enjoying your experience. So, again, one of the bigger places we get these stigmas is in what we're observing, what's being modeled for us in the world around us. And when it comes to sex, a lot of the time that comes down to porn. And while porn can be fun to emulate at times, like remember that so much of that is based off of a fantasy. And so much of that isn't even based off of everyone's fantasies. It has been more male aimed for a very long time. And while there can be evolutionary advantages and disadvantages in penis size, the truth is you can enjoy and experience another person's body and your own body without size having to do anything with it. I mean, if you're wanting to have a cock the size of a horse and I think the average, at least in America, is 5 to 6 inches, well, that's not happening. I do want to say there is also disadvantages for those males that are exorbitant in size. So let's again get more centered in this. And I want you to just take a moment and actually consider your genitalia. How do you feel about it? What do you think about it? When you think of what equals normal for genitalia, what do you believe that is? Where did you get those stories of what normal is. Now just kind of sit with those for a minute and just notice. As always, there is no judgment as far as rights or wrongs, good or bad. It's just about bringing it to noticing about your experience and where you are now. So then you can take and make a conscious choice about how you want to move forward. And that's any of these podcasts I lead or any of the work I do with people. That is the base foundation. Is it stepping out of judgment and just giving yourself an open space to notice. Because again, we get these narratives, we get these stories, we get these models of what the world, quote unquote, should look like or is supposed to be. And then a lot of the time we end up comparing ourselves to what that looks like, judging ourselves, and then telling ourselves again this story that we're not enough, we're not good enough, we'll never be able to fulfill our partner, whatever it is. And the thing that's really detrimental in that space is it actually pulls us out of fully being in the moment and experiencing our relationships or experiencing our relationship with our own body. So let's imagine the space where you are in play with a partner. You're being sexually intimate. Now, you could be in play, be in the moment with the person, and for whatever reason, something pops in your mind, and it's something like asking, well, are they even having fun? Do they even like what's going on? Right? Does this actually feel good for them? Or are they just pretending? I'm saying these things because they have been things I have experienced, and it means that I'm not the only person in the world experiencing them, that other people experience those thoughts. It's one of the things that can be one of the harder points around being in polyamorous relationships is we start comparing ourselves to another person and how we measure up, what this other person has that we don't have, right? We also don't consider what we have that the other person doesn't. That's a whole nother topic that I do want to get into at some point in time, but it definitely can lead to those feelings of lack and jealousy and high insecurity within our own being. The ultimate value point here is just noticing that all these stories, all these things we tell ourselves about how much size matters, really come together to really only be about meaning what we're making them mean. And I want to give an example again. It revolves around sex, but not specifically with size. And this came down to my own deeper exploration or getting my toes into the water of the exploration of what is sex? And this question came to me from the book, The Ethical Slut, which is a phenomenal read. Highly recommend it. But in that, the author ends up kind of asking you to explore these narratives that you've even created around what sex is. Because the definition of sex can vary for every single person. There can be penetrative sex, penis to vagina, right? There can be anal sex. There can be oral sex. There can be hand jobs. Then you start expanding from that and you get into all these different variations of what sex can be. And one of my favorite lines, in that very beginning section of the book, is the author being like, well, what is sex? Because you're reading a book that's about sex, are we having sex? Or are you having sex right now? Start defining that out for yourself and exploring where you've put limits on what that can look like for you. And where this relates back to my own personal story is I was actually going through a separation and the end of a relationship, all while this information was kind of integrating and processing for me. But it came down to this experience. My partner had had sexual affairs, and where he'd actually been having intercourse with other people. Well, in that, I started assessing, okay, like what would I consider cheating in these spaces? And I ended up having an experience with somebody who had been a very dear friend to me. There had kind of been this sexually charged energy between us for a very long time. And we shared intimate spaces. And those intimate spaces had nothing to do with penetration of either of our bodies of any sort. And at the same time, like while we weren't having intercourse, a part of me, like looking back to like the cheating my ex-partner had just done, was like, oh, like if that person had shared this sort of space with another person while we were in a defined monogamous relationship, I would have considered that cheating as well. Because there is a level of intimacy that fell into that connection between me and this other long-term friend and the type of intimacy we were sharing in that moment. And again, it's, to me, we had a sexual type of experience. Was it intercourse? Was there anal? Was there oral? Like, were those things there? No. And it was a very sexually charged experience with a high level of intimacy. So, again, this is just the invitation to start exploring your narratives, where those stories came from, and again, assessing like, do you want that, whatever it was, whatever you were modeled, whatever you were conditioned into, whatever you were told for stories of like what is good enough, what is big enough, what is too small, any of those things. Do you want that to continue to be your truth? Because on a very unconscious level, you made that your truth through accepting these stories. And now you can make the choice to step out of those. So, how do we step out of those? Because one, like if you're in sexual relationships with other people, you're sharing your body with other people, right? And maybe they really enjoy the sensations that come with stretching, or if it's a male receiving, the sensation of tightness around the penis, right? Well, even if your genital anatomy does not allow for this, and let's base this on you're wanting to stay in a monogamous relationship with this person you're being sexually intimate with, then there are multitudes of other ways to bring different sensations into the bedroom that don't actually have to do with your genitalia. Like, first off, if you want this to be based more around your genitalia, there are different things that you can also incorporate. So, like, Kegels and pelvic floor exercises are amazing for both men and women. This is not just for women on creating tighter pelvic floor muscles. Pelvic floor health in general is a fairly large issue that I've run across, and it can either be an over tightening in the area, or it can also be the muscles being too relaxed. If you're interested in learning more about this, I really recommend checking out one of my favorite instructors on the topic. Her name is Dagmar Kahn, and she is a pelvic floor specialist. Granted, she specializes in women's pelvic floor health. And men, your bodies are very similar, just the anatomy is arranged in a slightly different way. And you have all the same muscles that end up creating the female pelvic floor. So you can also hold tension or have excessive weakness in different areas. And if you notice in general that you have a lot of low back, hip pain, anything along those lines, like working with your pelvic floor can be immensely helpful. There can also be this disconnection that happens when you've been holding a lot of tension in your pelvic floor for a long time, where because you've kind of like acclimated to holding a certain amount of pain or discomfort in that area or tension, you actually start losing sensation. So you start experiencing numbness or more of a dulling out of your sensations in that region. And as you work with your pelvic floor more, it can actually help heighten sensation so you can tap into pleasurable sensation. And this usually involves working with it to where you're creating a level of relaxation. And then you work on strengthening. And one thing to be really clear on, especially if you're getting into pelvic floor work, a lot of the time the default recommendation by medical practitioners is to do Kegels. Well, Kegels are an exercise that help with toning and building muscle, which is great. It has its place, and it's not the only thing. If you already are experiencing excessive tightness in the pelvic floor or this tension and holding in your pelvic floor, and then you try to do things that are building more muscle, building more lean muscle mass, you're going to create more tension. It's going to kind of amplify those issues. So, to begin with, working on relaxing out the area and then starting to build muscle mass in that area, working on toning those muscles is what's going to be more beneficial over time rather than creating more issues with more tightening and tension. All right, so what are some of the other ways that you can start exploring if, like, let's say you're a male and your female partner wants to explore the sensation of stretching around the opening to her vaginal canal? Well, maybe your cock is not the right size for this. And I want to say, like, for the fact that a female's body can stretch to the extent of birthing a child out of it, that like that woman's body can stretch and expand much further than any man's cock, at least that I have ever come across, can accommodate. And granted, you're probably not going to be stretching your partner to that extent. I have seen some more extreme spaces of play where there is more extreme stretching and being in the BDSM and kink community, but those are more rare instances. So there is always incorporating your hands, right? That's the kind of like up level to this is called fisting, and it is where you're actually able to put most or your entire hand inside your partner's vaginal canal. Again, so these, I don't recommend all of a sudden just being like, oh, she wants to be stretched and like jamming yourself in there. This is something where there's probably some sort of tightness or contraction holding to where that stretch and done in a slow manner is going to feel good, is going to feel pleasurable. If you all of a sudden just try ramming something in there, it's more than likely going to cause your partner's body to go, what's this? And kind of like overcontract and either push you out or create a tight ring of tension in that vaginal canal. And so there's a slowness. I want you to think about playing in these spaces more like a massage than having to like get in, pound away with a lot of friction. This is at least the model I was introduced to of what sex was. Is it looked like, nope, a guy puts it in, he pounds away, both people orgasm, and things are done. There's a slowness that comes in. There's this more feminine aspect of pleasure that can come from complete stillness, or even like very micro movements is the word I'm looking for, to where like people put a lot of emphasis on there needing to be all there, this motion happening with intercourse spaces, and it doesn't actually have to be. There is some phenomenal um, Taoist and probably more neo-tantric practices where like you're not using conscious movement at all. You're not making your body move in any sorts of ways to be able to tap into the more nuanced pleasure and nuanced sensation of your partner's body. Okay, so we talked about one of the ways, so you're going to apply different sensation, the stretching sensation with your hand. Okay, there's also plenty of toys. There's so many toys that exist on the market, and while these can also seem intimidating, they can be immensely fun to play with. I do have to say, I personally got an order of um, dildos from a company called Bad Dragon about a year ago. And honestly, like, they're not on the cheap end of the spectrum, but they are well worth the investment. But it was hilarious because they have a variety of sizes and different shapes and forms. The great part in my experience of like kind of the unpackaging of these dildos was that the large size is pretty large. Like I actually wasn't expecting it to be the size that it is. Like I don't know what I was expecting, but all I had for a frame of reference was pictures off their website, and those compared it to a soda can. And I guess my brain had not put it into an actual perspective of what that looks like. Well, in this space, even just the unboxing of it, my partner and I both just died laughing because the size is quite large. And it was like, oh, how am I ever going to fit that in me? Granted, I have had a child. Like, I have moved a body or another body out of my body. And so like, yes, my body has been able to expand far past the diameter that this dildo happens to be. But again, like when I utilize that specific toy, it's not about there having to be any motion with it. My actual preference with that toy is it being very slow for use. And again, it's more focusing on the sensation of slow stretching, taking deep breaths to allow my body to slowly relax into it. Now, again, there are many toys for male application. So if you're wanting more of a tight squeeze around your cock and your partner's vagina is not able to amend that, like there are different ways to create that. You can incorporate hands, you can incorporate mouths. If your partner is open to anal sex, you can incorporate those play spaces. Again, there are lots of ways to incorporate play and not have size be a determining factor on any of that for how good you are as a play partner, for how amazing you are, how much pleasure you can bring a partner when sharing those intimate spaces together. And again, even that is can be a stigma. So if they're using toys, it means I'm not good enough. No, it's a different sensation. I will say there has been a very long time in my life where I actually didn't even really like toys that much as a female. And it just it didn't feel great. Now I've played with them in more ways and different ways that at certain times I enjoy them. And other times I'm perfectly happy with it just being me and my partner. Other times I'm perfectly happy with it just being myself and no toys at all. And again, stepping outside of the social narratives of making size, making the form really matter at all. Like there's so many fun ways to play with our bodies, play with our sexual experiences, play with our pleasure. And when we get caught up on like, oh, am I good enough? Oh, is it big enough? All those things, then it really starts taking away from your experience. And again, being in that moment, being present with the sensations that are coming up in your experience. Now, let's say you are playing with a partner and um, you're wanting to explore and experience something else, right? So let's say you have a partnership. Um, you've mainly played in vanilla realms, like maybe you've played with oral sex, doggy style, um, missionary position, just naming off some random ones that I recall. And like in that space, you're like, I would really like to experience playing with toys. And you guys haven't incorporated toys so far. Well, in that case, like it's about having a conversation with your partner. Like, let's say you're a female and you want to now bring in a vibrator or dildo. Like, you're noticing, oh, it'd be really nice, like, when my partner's inside of me to have stimulation on my clitoris. Or if, like, when your partner's going down on you, like, you also want the sensation of something inside of you. And their hands just aren't cutting it for you, or you want a different texture, right? It's texture comes into it, and that's the miraculous thing with all the dildos that exist is there's tons of different textures that are offered, and part of it's about getting to explore what you enjoy and getting to find those things. Again, same thing goes for the male side of it. um, I feel like from stories I've heard for men, I've heard a lot more examples of where males are playing with the difference in textures in their self pleasure masturbation practice. Um, I mean, you have the infamous movie American Pie, where the guy ends up fucking a pie. I've heard numerous stories about, oh, when I was a teenage boy, like I put my penis between the couch cushions, or I masturbated using this thing or that thing. And I feel like there's a lot more acceptance that's been, or at least in my experience, again, you may have a different social lens that has put that exploration of the body for males a little bit higher than it has for women. There's definitely been more social shame and stigma around women being in their sexual bodies. And I really want to help remove that. So ladies, like if you're wanting to explore things, please go ahead and explore. My biggest recommendation, because you have an internal orifice that you would be putting things into, is go about that in safe ways. So if it, like, make sure that whatever you're wanting to put in there does not have toxic chemicals on it. The inside of your vaginal canal is a mucosa membrane. And that means it's kind of like the inside lining of your mouth or your nasal passage. And the transfer of substances and chemicals is actually a lot more permeable across that than it is the skin on the outside of your body. One other thing that comes to mind is I remember hearing a long time ago, like, don't put a bottle up there, especially one that is not closed. So if let's say for whatever reason you decided, oh, I want to try putting this like glass bottle inside my body, please make sure that it is capped, because what can happen is you end up creating a vacuum with that bottle and your body, and then it doesn't want to come out. Another great frame for getting to play with items, and this comes down more to anal play specifically because the vaginal canal has an endpoint at the cervix where the cervix is more closed off. The cervix doesn't open up to a huge extent except for during childbirth. Um, if you're playing with anal toys, please, please, please make sure that they have a nice base on them. So that means that it has something that you can hold on to. It means it has kind of like a round flat plug to the end, or I've seen ones that off the bottom of the toy, it kind of looks like a T. This is because if you're playing with an anal toy and it decides to go inside of you, because it does not have the space to prevent it from traveling further inside of your body, it can keep traveling up, and your intestinal tract is much longer than the vaginal canal. So, and that goes to males or females, like, please, if you are playing with things inside your anus, please make sure that you have access to be able to remove them or to prevent them from traveling further inside your body than you're wanting them to, because otherwise it means you may be going to the emergency room, or it could be a very uncomfortable and potentially painful situation of a partner needing to help fish something out of your anus, which I have not heard great reviews on from the people who I know who have experienced that. Um, okay, let's bring this back in to our main topic of when does size matter? Again, it is only mattering as much as you are making it matter. And that even comes down to, let's say, like, you have a partner who wants to be experiencing something else. Like, there is nothing wrong with them wanting to experience something else. It still doesn't mean that what you have isn't good enough. It just means that maybe they like what you have and are wanting to experience something else. It doesn't mean it's a either or situation. So, in that, one of the biggest core foundations that you can come to is, regardless of what information you have gotten from the world outside you about what is enough, right? What isn't enough, what what's normal, any of the things, is coming to spaces of self-acceptance, understanding, right? This gratitude and love of your own body, of your own being, and what you have to play with and move through in the world. And I recommend bringing these practices to all areas of your body, not just your genitalia, but our genitalia is one of those areas that can get so much stigma wrapped up around it because sexuality, especially in the United States, has been so taboo for so many years. And one of my absolute favorite practices to start working with this are mirror practices. And there's a few different layers that you can play with in this space. And the first one is just like, this is more of an overall body, but you can also focus this to just the genitalia. But the overall practice is at least once a day, purposely look in the mirror. And when you look in the mirror, Find something about your body that you genuinely love or appreciate. And then give yourself a descriptive compliment on it. The third layer here is, so I used to do this practice, and when I would do it all inside my head, which was great. And that had a lot of impact for me for a long time. And then at some point in time, I shifted it and did an online challenge where I invited everybody to that main initial practice. And if they wanted to celebrate with me online, that they could. But I added a caveat, or like a little level bump up for myself in it, where I actually spoke those words out loud to myself when I would look in the mirror. And I had already been doing that practice, again, mainly internally in my head. And when I started doing this for myself, where I spoke the words out loud, I was actually quite surprised to find that I started crying on several of the instances. And it gives a different flow of how that information comes into your system, because now you're not only thinking it, it's not just stuck in your head, you're actually allowing your ears to hear you say these things to yourself. And at the same time, like as you speak, that sound resonates throughout your body. And was it resonates through your body, it resonates out to each cell in your body. And I've played around with like little handheld audio speakers and placed them on different parts of people's body and my body to see how much the sound actually traveled. Well, sound gets a little wonky when it travels in water. Like you can't tell what direction it's coming from, but I think it's like 70 some percent of our body is made up of water. So that sound is going to resonate throughout your cells. It's going to carry throughout them. There's also been certain studies that have gone into exploring where people speak loving or hateful words to glasses of water. I believe there's a rice experiment that also exists with this. I believe when I was in high school, I actually did a plant experiment along the same lines of playing different types of music for plants, but you can also do the same thing with plants where you're speaking loving words or words of gratitude to a plant, and then another one you're speaking like hateful or uh, negative words to it, and they will actually present with radically different growth. And usually the one that received loving words or words of gratitude grows really well and really prominently, and the other one will kind of um, shrivel and wither and doesn't thrive within itself. So again, that's it's all bringing it back in a loop of creating these spaces of self-love, of creating these spaces of acceptance. And you can do that with your genitalia as well. For women, if you have never done this practice, I really want to invite you to take 5 or 10 minutes, either right now or tonight, but like make a note for yourself that you're going to do this. And it may feel scary to step into, especially if you've had a lot of negative beliefs around your pussy, around your vagina. But the invitation is to take a hand mirror and just look at your genitalia. And then it's a little bit easier for you. At the same time, I'm going to also invite you to take a hand mirror and look at your genitalia, because you've had a certain perspective in how you look at your body from this top down view, or from looking directly in a mirror. But I want to give you that invitation of the hand mirror as well. And again, like, I want you to bring the idea of looking at this with completely fresh eyes, with eyes that like hold no judgment about what you're seeing, just tapping into curiosity, right? And just take that moment for yourself. And even if it's a freckle, even if it's a little mole, whatever it is, try to find something that you appreciate. I know one thing that made some of my own personal uh, body love practices more valuable or easier for me to tap into was the fact that I had carried a child in my body. So, one of my most hated body areas for the majority of my life was actually my stomach. And with my stomach in particular, like I had a really, really hard time connecting with finding anything I found loving or gratitude wise towards it. Well, then at some point during this practice, I brought my attention to some stretch marks that I have on my stomach after my pregnancy. And I actually was able to tap into immense gratitude for what a fucking phenomenal job my body had done in carrying a child in my stomach, right? In being able to grow a whole life there. And granted, like that's not everybody can do that. I mean, males, unless they've changed something scientifically, like that's not possible. But there are still things you can tap into, even if it's like you finding appreciation for how your gut is able to process food, right? Um, that's just even in the way your body functions and comes together, it's pretty miraculous that our bodies do function and function as well as they do so we can exist within the world, and we tend to lose sight of that. So there's plenty of things you can find gratitude and appreciation for, and it's just finding what's right for you in those moments. But try to find at least one thing and then make a daily practice out of it. And you don't always have to do where you're looking at your genitalia. If you notice that you have a really hard time with that area of your body, I'm going to recommend like doing a body check-in of this mirror practice at least like 2 to 4 times in a week, and bring your presence to it. Like make sure you're showing up. It only has to be like a 1 to 5 minute practice. It can be longer if you want. There's nothing wrong with that either. But it's about bringing again this love, this gratitude, this acceptance to your body and how it exists and how it serves you in these moments. And I know like this, I've known plenty of other people who've had health conditions, right? I've known a few people who've had ulcerative colitis or Crohn's disease or other things, and especially when it came to their gut, they had a really hard time connecting to finding gratitude because in so many ways it can feel like a betrayal of your body, like something you have no control over. I still want to invite you to like to find something if you can. The biggest thing is like just mean whatever you're connecting with, right? You can, a lot of the time we can tell if somebody else is lying to us. So your body is going to know if you're lying to it a lot better than it's going to know that somebody else is lying to it. So find again something you genuinely connect with and can find appreciation for. And really like try this practice for about 21 days, because I think it's like you can end up creating new habits, creating new neural pathways in a shorter time span, but a lot of the time, like if you do something for 21 days and are doing it daily to create a new habit, then it takes about 21 days for that to settle into being something that your system will just do more naturally. It's kind of like creating, uh, you are creating a new neural pathway. So your old neural pathway, let's say every time you looked in the mirror, you didn't think anything, or you thought something judgmental and down talked your body on some level. Well, in that, that's you formed an old path through the woods, right? And you may have defaulted to that path for most of your life. In this instance, you're coming to this like trailhead of I see myself in the mirror, and then now you're saying, you're consciously making sure to say something positive, something loving, something that's in gratitude, acceptance, appreciation of your body. You're creating a new path. So you can imagine this like those first couple times you're walking through, you're like taking a machete and chopping a new trail through these woods that you've been traveling through. And now, like for 21 days, you're consciously making a choice when you come to that crossroads or like where you've created this new trail head of, I'm going to take the new trail. And it is a conscious decision. The thing that ends up happening is the more you keep traveling down this new trail you've made, is that trail gets worn in, right? The brush starts getting pushed back or broken off because you're traveling down it more and the trail becomes more prominent. Over time, that old trail, the brush starts to fill in, the trail starts to fill in, and you can potentially even get to a point where you don't even see that that old trail is even an option anymore. But if you find yourself slipping up, going into old patterns of negative thought or just kind of judgmental, critical thought when you're looking in the mirror, just take that as oh, I just stepped back on the wrong trail. Let's hop back over to the new one. It doesn't have to be this huge fallout that like you've messed up and you've done all this hard work and now you have to start all over. Well, you don't. You've already been forging the new trail. It's just when you got to that trailhead, like today, you happen to not look to the right where the new trail is and you just kept going kind of in auto mode. And it's a practice. And it's going to take practice. So please give yourself that grace in learning a new skill, in bringing loving attention to your body, and you being the first one who does that. So much of the time, it's another one of the stigmas that we can really get is we will rely on the love, adoration, or affirmation that we get from our partners or sexual playmates or friends and family, granted, those aren't usually sexual situations, to tell us that like our body is good enough that we bring somebody else enough pleasure in bed, all these things, but we don't actually focus on bringing that to ourselves. And I'd say for me, one of the areas where I didn't focus on bringing that to myself was one, I had a real shitty self esteem. Um, and if I wasn't getting that validation from outside of me, I didn't think it was actually real. And so my internal monologues, my internal voices were a lot of very critical, harsh, and demeaning talk to myself. And especially if it came to like the end of a relationship, my my self-esteem would usually plummet for a little bit because I thought it meant something was hugely wrong with me, that I had been the biggest problem, all these things. I do want to say, I'm not saying I wasn't part of the problem. If you're in a relationship and that relationship goes into chaos mode or takes takes a hard right turn all of a sudden out of nowhere, like you had your part in that. It doesn't mean that all the responsibility was yours or that you were completely the one at fault. Um, but it does mean you did have your part, and I recognize that in myself, and I'm much better at delineating what my actual responsibility is now. But in that, like when I was putting all the validation I needed for being sexy enough, being attractive enough, all these things onto another partner, like that's a lot of pressure that I was putting on them. And when the relationship would end, my ego would also take that hit, and all those old narratives would pop back telling me I wasn't enough. When you're fulfilling that in yourself first, if you're not a good match with somebody else, if the relationship has unhealthy qualities, it's much easier to take a step back and say, you know what, I'm good enough, and this relationship isn't really working for me. Versus getting stuck in all your insecurities that you now need to stay in a relationship because it validates some part that you want to be validated. And I do want to say, like, that there's also a good chance that those insecurities are still popping off for you, even if you have that partner, and that in ways like they're probably giving you a lot of reassurance around what those insecurities are. And again, that can end up being a lot, to put on another person. Um, it can also be those places where we end up feeling really needy at points in time because, again, we're trying to rely on all the things outside of us to fulfill who we are, to make that egoic vision of ourselves a reality when we we're perfectly capable of creating that within ourselves without the help of anyone else, and doing that in a genuine way. I guess one last piece, and I have gotten different reactions to this, but overall, like it's putting out there, like if you were to go into a nursery at a hospital where they have a ton of babies all laid out in bassinets in one room where you can like look in through this window, is there going to be like a single baby that you look in and see and like you're like, that baby doesn't deserve love, that baby is not enough? Like there may be some, especially if you fall into being racist or anything like that, on a more extreme level. But for the most part, right, people will say, well, no. Well, the thing is, like, we're all exactly like those babies. Like, you're not going to go up to a baby and be like, your penis isn't big enough, or your vagina is too small or too big. Like, their bodies are perfect exactly as they are. So are ours. We're just adults now, and we get caught up in all the narratives that they're anything other than perfect as they are. Like, if your body is not serving you well, right, that is a whole different story. And that's something to work with within your body. But let's start stepping into a frame where the way we talk to ourselves, the way we view ourselves is serving. All right, I think that is all I have for today. If you're interested in working with me, then go ahead and pop down into the description and you can find my resources list or onto the About page on YouTube. I am curious, what do you want to shift for yourself? What was your biggest takeaway during this call today? Um, how do you want to start viewing your body, your sexuality in new ways? when when does size really matter? When are you making it matter? And do you want to keep allowing that to matter? All right, until next time, have a great week. Also, I will add a link for Dagmar's content down below if you do want to learn more about pelvic floor health, along with the book, The Ethical Slut. All right, have a good one.